the presentation now. So slide 1, 83% of American adults own cell phones, and 3/4 of them send and receive text messages on a daily basis. Americans under 55 text more than they talk on the phone and email combined. Over 70% of Americans would prefer to text over phone for live help, because we just don't have the infrastructure yet, right? You can't text Amazon. There's a lot of people who would like to be able to do that if they had a problem with their package or if they had an issue with their device. Over 98% of texts are open in the first 5 minutes, so tremendously high read rate. 80% of all web browsing in the United States is happening on smartphones. So that is an amazing statistic. That's why data plans are what they are. That's why we're charged for them, and it's a profit center, because people are going home and they're browsing from their smartphone rather than having broadband internet at their home. Contact centers pay on average 80 cents per text encounter, whereas the call can cost as much as $20. So there's potential cost savings if you adopt texting and INR. Individuals prefer text when dealing with sensitive subjects. So there's research now that supports this, but this is also seen in the work that Caree Jewell and her team does, and all of the INRs and 211s and crisis agencies and everybody that's now texting is experiencing is this interesting component that people who reach out by text are often more readily willing to share sensitive information. And there's a perceived additional privacy element to texting that you probably experience in your personal life. And sometimes people will be texting in a room full of people, and they'll be texting about sensitive topics like emotional health or their family's health or financial matters. And to be able to do that, for instance, being in line at social services and being able to text, say, with a 211 and get information in a way that saves them time, but then also allows them to share that information even in the public setting. Okay, so we're going to start now with the slides. These next series of slides were developed by Heart of Florida, United Way 211, and Caree Jewell. She is the Senior Director of 211 at Heart of Florida United Way. Heart of Florida United Way 211 is going to share about how they have integrated texting into all their programs and services, including a robust INR program that serves not only Central Florida, but other regions under separate contracts. So they're handling different regions and taking text from those different regions. And also they have an overnight texting support or services to cover other regions too. So they're multitasking and handling quite a lot of traffic these days. All right, now I'm going to introduce Caree. Caree, welcome to the webinar. Are you there?
I am. Thank you, Jonathan. I really appreciate that introduction. So just to piggyback on what he said, we are serving parts of Tennessee as well as Kentucky, and we're doing text through the 898-211 platform. And the great thing about EMS and serving multiple contracts and areas inside and outside of Florida, we're able to use the EMS 98211 platform branded for 211, so it doesn't matter whether you're a nonprofit 211 or United Way 211, we're able to use that with multiple CRMs. So that's really been wonderful for us because it doesn't matter where they want the contact logged, we can get it all through the same platform. So that's been really helpful for us. And people just simply text their zip code into 898-211, which allows us to know what service area the person is texting us from, so we know which CRM to log it into. So our texters are completely, our staff who are texting are completely cross-trained to answer text from all of our service areas. So I think one of the things that I hear the most from people moving toward text or thinking about using text is the concern about fear of technology. How do I do crisis intervention? How much is this going to cost me? Aren't these texts going to be longer than on the phone? How do I have staff that multitask? So I hear that from managers, but I also hear that from our staff and staff that are going to be asked to do the texting. And basically what we try to say is this is a psychological barrier, right? So you see the turtles, they're all, you know, upside down and crazy looking, and the mama turtle, but they're all smiling. They're all happy, because a paradigm shift simply means that we're moving from one psychological concept to another, and fear of change is normal. So one of the first things you want to do in your 211 center or your INR center is to introduce the concept slowly. So start talking to your staff about text, you know, as far in advance of actually implementing as you possibly can. So you want to talk about the why. How does this fit into your mission? Allowing people to access you through text hits on a lot of those points that Jonathan talked about, which were the texting trends, that people are using their mobile device to browse. So that means they have access to text right there as they're looking at your online database or your website. We're seeing that text is actually something that is the preferred method of communication, even more so for lower income families, because they don't have cell phone minutes. So introduce the concept, talk about the why, get that change investment buy-in. And then you want to have the platform available to your staff for advanced training and role plays. So you're probably thinking, well, how do I do a role play via text? And actually, that's the most fun thing when you first start out that you can do with your staff, is ask them, you know, who wants to test this out? Who's excited about it? And that goes to the third bullet point of allowing staff to choose. So you pick people who are interested, curious, want to experience it, not with a live client, but with just a role play. So you're going to be texting off your smartphone right next to them, and it's going to show up on the EMS platform on their computer, and they can text back. And you can do that just like you do your role plays in training for phone, except this is actually using the platform. So it really gives them a hands-on experience. So you can full-on pretend to be a client. Some of the things that are a little bit different about text is not how we as staff interact with the clients, but how the clients interact with us. They're very short, they're very curt, they can ignore our data collection questions, some of those things. So in those role plays, you want to make sure that you're acting like a texter. Act like someone who just wants to get the information and wants to get off the line. And that will give them that kind of real experience. And then if you are a crisis line, and all 211s really are, all INRs get crisis texts or phone calls, you want to play that role as well. So when you think about that.
Sorry, Caree, did you want me to? Okay. So this slide, best practices, is that okay?
Yep, you're fine. Thanks. So when you think about that and doing those role plays, you want to prepare your staff by helping them to understand psychologically that text is no different than a phone call. So when you look at this best practices slide, what do we want to do on a phone call and a text? Active listening, that's always key, helping the person feel heard and understood. That's our entire reason for being in a lot of our contacts that we have, because maybe there isn't a referral or maybe the person's in crisis. So best practices on text are the same exact best practices you have on the phone. You want to have a great greeting, you want to build rapport. And with text, you can have that greeting. The first one is automatic, which is great because the person gets an immediate response. And then the second one can be a canned response that you give to the person, along with some rapport building that you might add in, because each staff is going to have a little bit of personalization they want to do. So the canned responses make it a little bit easier than being on the phone. You want to continue to make sure that throughout the text interaction, you're summarizing and paraphrasing, you're reflecting feelings, you're using clarifying questions, and you're giving out referrals. And that is exactly the same INR ARC or crisis interaction that you would have via phone. So your staff, you need to just keep emphasizing to them, this is the same thing that you would do on the phone. So instead of saying it, you're going to be typing it. If you think of that, you know, make sure that you're just emphasizing that over and over, because it's that psychology that's the barrier to staff enjoying doing this. And then the other thing that you have to think about as a manager is they need to be able to use proper grammar and spelling, and they need to be able to type pretty fast. That is different from the phones. Now, if you look at our no side, no abbreviations, slang, emoticons, all caps, or joking. You don't do that on the phone either. You don't use jargon on the phone or abbreviations or slang. You never make an inappropriate joke with a client, but over text, of course, it's even more important because there's no tone of voice. And you would never yell at a client over the phone. You can see that there's actually, it's really similar. So implementing text into your INR is very easy to do that for people who are used to doing it on the phones. If they're following AIR's best practices, National Suicide Prevention Line best practices, they're going to be able to do this via text. You want to keep emphasizing that. So on the next slide, we're going to look at one of the things that is a little bit different about referrals for text. So staff will have a tendency, just like clients, to do shortcuts when they're texting information to clients. Now, for your basic referrals that you're going to give out repetitively, you can create canned responses for those so that all the details can be there. But for something unique, like for example, this person was asking for food pantries as well. So you're going to see that we're giving out Lazarus Restoration Ministries. No details are given regarding the hours. That piece that's highlighted there is critical and important because on the other ones, we're giving out the dates and times that the places are open, the whole phone number, and the place that they can call. Now, if it were walk-in, you would, of course, want to include the address. So staff have a tendency with referrals in text to shortcut that a little bit. And I think you see that on the phones, too. They'll give out the name and phone number and kind of move on. But it's really important to give the client all of those details that we're going to be sharing with them so that they can have the best chance of making sure that they're going to be able to reach the referral and get the service that they need. A lot of the questions that I also get with regard to text is, okay, well, how do we make sure that our texts are quality? So what do we think about with quality assurance? And Jonathan, you can go ahead and move the slide. With, you know, how is this different from phone is a lot of the question that I get, and it's not. And I can't emphasize that enough. In some ways, doing quality assurance with text is easier. So if you already have a phone quality assurance form that you're using for phone calls, you just need to alter that form so that it says texter instead of caller, because you're going to see that 99% of what's on that form is relevant to text as well. You want to be able to live monitor text just like you would live monitor a phone call, so you can sit right next to the person while they're typing. That's also really great for coaching and mentoring, because as they're typing back to the client, you can give them tips. You can be verbally talking with them, so doing that live coaching. So this text also allows you to enhance the skills of your staff by doing this QA process. One of the wonderful things about text is you can print out the entire text interaction after it's occurred, which allows the staff to do a self-evaluation using the same QA form and comparing that to the evaluation of the QA team. So I think that's a really wonderful thing for staff because they can see exactly what they wrote. It's just like having a recorded call, but it's also more detailed in a way because you can reread it and go over it again and again with them, whereas listening to a recording, you're going to miss pieces of that when you're listening to yourself. When you're reading what you wrote, you're going to miss less. One of the other pieces about text through EMS that's really great is that you can send out a survey via text or a follow-up or post-text survey, and that can be a quality assurance or was your need met or any questions that you would normally follow up with a client via phone. You can send that out over text through EMS and get responses back and use that in the same process that you would to evaluate staff or the overall quality of your texting program. So all of these are really great benefits to using text, and it's, again, just really similar to what you do on the phone. So that soft launch, going slow, what that means is that our marketing is a little bit different because we want to take into account the psychology of our staff. We don't want to scare them. Change is already really scary for people. So if you're creating this change and you're introducing a new modality for people, again, letting them self-select is a really great idea. And then for the marketing components, the soft launch, that means that when you first put in the program into your center, you really don't tell anyone about it. Then when you're staff is comfortable and you feel like you've got a good handle on things, that's when you open it up live to the client. So a week or two after the soft launch, after everybody's had a chance to practice, people have had a chance to self-select and say, I really like this, I want to be logged into text while we're here, things like that. Then, the next thing that we did was we put it on our website and our online database. So people who were already leaning toward electronic contacts were seeing this available via text. Very quickly after that, we did a press release that we were available for texting now. And it's, a very simple message. Text your zip code to 898-211. Get a live 211 specialist. Same service you would via phone, same quality, same referrals. So once we did the press release, we then incorporated that into all of our messaging. So every time that I went out and did any kind of speaking engagement where I talked about 211, anyone in our organization that talked about our information referral programming always included the message, you can reach 211 by texting your zip code to 898-211, dialing 211, and then we also have chat and email 24/7. So that got incorporated into all of the messaging. And at the end of every radio interview, they always ask you, what's something you'd really want the entire community to know about 211? And that was when I would always say, very important they know that we're here 24/7. They can dial, they can text, they can chat. And I would keep that in that messaging. And then that's when we started to see things really grow. But it wasn't until we put it on our IVR for those who were calling us where they heard, oh, I'm getting put on hold. I'm getting the hold music or message or whatever. And then we would immediately give them the message. You can also reach 211 by texting your zip code to 898-211. So in the beginning, when we were going kind of slow and easing into the process, we weren't taking advantage of all of the efficiencies because we kind of did that soft launch. Our marketing was slow. So we were having people doing a phone call and a text at the same time. But where you get those really great efficiencies is when you have high text volume. And after we put it on our IVR, that's when we were seeing we could have a staff or more. Actually, now we have 2 staff dedicated just to electronic contacts. And you can do 3 texts simultaneously. That's another great benefit to this, where you then start to see significant savings over a phone call. Some of my staff who are what I call super performers or high performers is they can do 5 texts or 5 electronic contacts at the same time. I'll be honest with everybody out there, I can't do that. I can do 3, and that is the recommended best practice is to do no more than 3. But I've got some people who can do 5 because they love it. They love interacting with clients that way. They get a lot out of it. They're great multitaskers. So those are the people who you kind of evolve and find in your center. And as I've been talking about this, I've also been giving a lot of hints about what makes a great staff person to do texting. And those are on the slides prior. But when you're growing and, all contact centers have turnover, you're going to see some ongoing challenges, right? So multitasking, doing 3 texts at a time or 5 for my high performers, or doing a phone call and a text if you don't have the text volume yet, that's challenging. And as you bring on new staff, again, that's scary for them. So you want to restart that change process for that new staff and ease them into it. Make sure you're going back and you're always doing those role plays or fake texts with them to make sure that they're connected to the psychology that, okay, this is the same as the phone. And actually, a lot of my staff say it's easier than the phone because of the crisis component. They can get help. They can verbally talk to a team lead if somebody is texting in crisis, whereas if they're on the phone with them, there's not as much pause or a moment to think. So another challenge is the response time of our client. So someone who's texting us may not have the same urgency to close out that text or complete the interaction that we do. So occasionally it gets frustrating for staff where the client hasn't responded, or maybe they've ignored a data collection question that we've had to ask again because it's relevant to the referrals, or they're just not responding for a little while. So that's where you have to start looking at your clients and what are they like. So we've developed a best practice of closing out a text after it's been open for 15 minutes. because most of our texters will text us back within 15 minutes, but you know that sounds like forever. So that can be frustrating to staff. Chats, it's even more, people are even less likely to respond quickly. So that is a benefit to text in that respect. Language barriers. So we do have multilingual specialists here. Primarily the language we get is Spanish. We do get text in Spanish, but every once in a while we won't have a Spanish speaker available to take over that text or take on that text. So we will let the person know that the client know that we're using Google Translate. And we, know that they will laugh at us because Google Translate translates things in a very funny way. But it's okay because they know that you're using Google Translate, you know it, and so they're very accommodating. Clients are really wonderful about that. So that is a challenge, but it's one that's easily overcome. There are some assumptions that our staff make about text when they first start doing it. Some of those assumptions are things like, oh, all the texters are going to be teenagers. They're going to be younger. The texters are going to be somehow different from our normal callers. The only difference between a texter and a caller is that texters tend to be more short, more concise, and they want to get off of the interaction a little bit faster than callers. It's more transactional a lot of times. Everything else about a texter is the same. We find the same demographics as far as age, income, gender, whether or not they have children, whether or not they've had military service. There's really not any different in those bell curves, like for age, for text, as there are for our callers. So that's really important. Another ongoing challenge is continuing to train staff on focusing on the crisis and making sure that they're reflecting feelings over text, because you get a lot of clients who are transactional. They're very curt, they're very short. So your specialists have to remember and take that extra emphasis to reflect those feelings. Type in, I can see that you're feeling very sad. I can see that you're feeling lost right now. Making sure that you're doing that empathetic reflection so that it doesn't become strictly transactional and you're leaving the door open for people to talk about, as Jonathan mentioned in the beginning, the more sensitive topics, because you will get a lot of text disproportionately, actually, as a percentage that are crisis compared to on your phone line, you're getting more strictly INR. And the reason for that with the text is because the clients feel safer, more emotionally removed from the process. Whereas on the phone, they can hear your tone of voice. There's a lot more emotional intimacy. So clients in crisis will choose text as their preferred method. That's a challenge for us. You can see here that we're unable to hear the client's tone of voice. That's difficult when you're working with someone in crisis. So we have occasionally, when someone's been suicidal, in severe crisis, or they're trying to do something very complicated over text, like scheduling an appointment, we will try to convert them to a phone caller. And what we have found is that less than 1% of our texters accept that offer. So when you think about that, it means that our clients prefer this modality. So even though for us, it's no different than talking with them on the phone, you're just typing what you would say, that is something that's really important for our clients to have access to this modality. And then of course, once you put it on your IVR, you're going to see your text volume shoot up tremendously. So if we take a look at the next slide, you can kind of see our path that we took. So you can see our soft opening in 2012, 2013, by then we'd done our press release, we'd done our online database information put out there, we'd incorporated it in all of our messaging, and you can see from 2013 to 2014, we didn't really see a lot of growth. In 2014 to 2015, we saw a good incline there, some good growth in the number of interactions or texts that we were having. And just so you know, this graph represents actual texts back and forth, not complete client transactions. So in a complete client transaction, you can have 10 texts from the client going back and forth. But this represents individual text, but it still gives you the idea. So in 2015, when we had the finally the bright idea to put it on our IVR, you can see that's where we really started seeing our efficiencies, because you see that dramatic increase. And the next slide just highlights that even more, just that 2015 to 2016, you can see the slope on that is tremendously increased. And that was when we put it on our IVR. And that was where we started to see our real cost savings. And we were having, in 2014, we did have enough text interactions to go ahead and have a staff dedicated to electronic contacts. They were doing 3 simultaneously on many occasions. We were definitely seeing the cost benefits to that. But once we put it on our IVR and we saw that dramatic increase, we had to increase the number of staff who were doing electronic contacts, and we saw that efficiency go up and the cost savings go up. So my recommendation would be to move your marketing forward as fast as you can without scaring or traumatizing your staff. You know, make sure that they're prepared emotionally to interact via this modality. But to move forward much more quickly than we did, because I think that was something we lost a little money in going slowly. So I would have jumped in faster if I could go back in time and talk to myself. So now I'm going to let Jonathan, who is the COO of Educational Messaging Services Prevention Pays, I'm going to let him take over and talk a little bit about the technology.
Sure, thank you, Caree. And as we had said, Caree's going to hang out and be here for questions. So if you do have questions, you can write them in. So a little bit of background on the platform. The platform is entirely web-based. So just as you log in to, say, your CRM, you also would log into Prevention Pays, right? And then that's where you handle the live interactions. And that slide that Caree was showing just before with the encounters, and the encounter is what happens. That's like your call report, right? So X number of calls, X number of text encounters. Those are equivalent. But in your encounters report, you get probably a little bit more details than maybe you're used to. You get total incomings and outgoings, who took the encounter, whether or not the encounter was resolved, what zip code they texted from, and then any issues that were addressed within the encounter, and then the total duration of the encounter. So incomings and outgoings, but then also in minutes to hours, because an encounter might actually go into the hour possibility, you know, multi-issue, very complex needs, and INR can sometimes move into that category. So, but that's what that slide was talking about, the encounter, and your encounters report is exactly that. It's synonymous with your call report, but with more details. So no information is going onto your computer. Everything is all on co-located servers in data centers that are tier 3, so HIPAA compliant. Message tracking, what does that mean? So message tracking actually is the carriers supporting it, so it's carrier grade. So when you send a text down the line to the end user, that message is being reported back by their carrier as being first acknowledged, we got it, thank you, and then delivered. This was actually delivered to the mobile handset in question. So you have it on good authority that your texts are getting delivered. Now, let's say a message doesn't get delivered. Let's say there's a problem. The person is roaming, or they're outside of cell phone tower reach, which used to be much more common and is rarer and rarer these days, just because the infrastructure is so darn good, right? That most texts go through without issue. But in the event that something does go awry, the phone becomes damaged, or they are in fact roaming, and the text isn't able to be delivered in a moment in time, the system, as long as the carrier reports back that it can be retried, then the system will auto retry every 5 minutes. So you don't have to, the specialist doesn't have to worry or burden themselves with retrying sending messages that fail. Also, it's of value to your specialist to know when their messages are getting delivered. Kind of like when you text with your friends and family. So if you text with somebody in the same network and the same carrier, like for instance, iPhone users, they actually can read, right? You get that little report that your phone or your message was actually read. This is kind of like that. It's as good as that end user actually calling you up and telling you, hey, I got your text, because it's the carrier saying so. Opt-in, opt-out. What does that mean, right? Opt-in, opt-out. It just means that the end user has the right to ask for text from you, but then they also have the right to cancel them. And to cancel them, they just need to text stop, quit, or unsubscribe. Very simple. And when they do text that, then you can't send them more texts. You see a record, or you've got a complete transcript and history of everything you did with them, but you can't keep sending them text messages, which is important. That's a key characteristic. In fact, there's a huge lawsuit now that's kind of pending with this on this exact topic. Uber, which seems to be in the news a lot these days, but they went with a they went with a digital long code text messaging model with their drivers and their drivers and users. And people in the moment wanted Uber, and then they would get text messages. But after that, when they weren't traveling, or they didn't want to hear about Uber updates, they were still getting text messages, and they didn't have any way of opting out and stopping those messages. And so this created a lot of frustration among the people, not just the end user, but also the drivers, because drivers would move on to other jobs or whatever, and they were still getting Uber texts. So Uber has since switched over to the short code model because it has the automated opt-in, opt-out protocols. End user privacy is just that, right? It's the ability to stop text just as you can ask for them. Intuitive controls. Caree talked a lot about that. And she also talked about how her specialist practices texting before they start taking live text. So the user interface is designed to support that. It's designed to support practice texting. It's also designed to support administrative oversight. So an administrator can, for instance, track conversations while they're happening and not impact the conversation or the outcome. Just be a support or fly on the wall and be able to see what is transpiring. So very transparent and easy and intuitive controls. Caree also talked about super users, right? The end user, or I'm sorry, the staff member, end user, staff member who is very efficient with this system. There are going to be those individuals who take to it. They just like it, like bees to honey, right? They appreciate the communication as on a personal level, but they also appreciate the communication as from the business side of it, from the experience side of it, from what they like to do during the day. So, you know, there's people who take tickets all day for technology companies, right? And they're on the keyboard and they're very happy, and they're not on the phone and they're not talking to people. They're just on the keyboard. Well, that's what you might find in some of these people who really appreciate the texting application and texting with your end users, is they might just be very good at it. And so you'll see that, and they'll rise to the top, and that will help you in determining who you put at the controls of the text service. Now, we also talk a lot about building educational experiences. So separate from INR, if you go into and wrap your mind around community engagement, right, and utilizing strategies that reach your community in group messaging ways. So the service can be used to do exactly that. Provide INR, live support, but also provide group messages to individuals who opt in and request information through a group capacity way. And what's wonderful about the group texting programs is they're very much automated, which is very nice, right? You can put them in place, and then you can have maybe one person who's a content curator. And all the content curator does is they know the end user. That's all they need to do. They need to be able to know the end user and what they want to receive. And so then they send content out, and they can put it up in months in advance and have that go out according to a schedule. You can have message tracks, so series of texts that everybody gets no matter what the moment they sign up. So you can create educational experiences. So why should INRs text? Well, you increase reach, right? Caree talked about that. increasing reach. She also talked about how when they started to really emphasize text, they saw a huge increase in their contacts. The population's there, they're ready to text. And so it's kind of just that hurdle of letting them know. Increasing capacity, 0 drop rates. So phone, people can call and drop off and they don't get the help they need. But text, even if you're away and you're unable to take the text, 24 hours later, you can still help that end user. And question about our push program, and then you can respond when you're able to. Increase sustainability. Grants and funding initiatives are starting to go and seek out texting and texting capacity. And so there's really a lot of types of programs that are starting to go down these paths. And there's grants that you can get that show that, or that you can get that then make it possible to then do texting, but then low impact, right? So if you do a program like, for instance, SNAP, right? This is a perfect example. This SNAP program, which is going to be statewide in Indiana, uses a fully automated pre-screen utility. So end users are asked about 10 questions, and then, Carrie, are you able to hear?
Yeah, you came back, Jonathan.
Okay, good. It sounds like we had technical difficulties for a moment. Okay, so community impact. So SNAP is an example, and this is a fully automated utility, right? This asks about 10 questions, and those questions can also be customized, and then they obtain questions that are eligibility. And so at the end of that, you can then route them to the location where they'll complete their application. But you can use this utility, this fully automated utility, as a way to screen something that would cost a lot of money, and does cost a lot of money, to have specialists doing all of that front work. Well, imagine for a moment that you're screening individuals, and then that by the time they come to the specialist, they're already qualified for the SNAP program because they've answered the questions that are needed in order to do so. Another program that's like a community impact is the Mission United, and Heart of Florida, United Way 211, had pioneered this texting program. And this texting program uses a combination of the group texting, but then they also combine it with the live help piece. So this is how it's done. They have veterans texting in a keyword that then is an issue that they are interested in. So they picked employment, legal help, education, finances, healthcare. Now, a veteran can pick all 5, or they can pick 1 or 2. And then the content curator logs in and just sends content down those lines. And everybody who signs up for each one of those, some sign up for all 5, would get each of the texts that are specific to those topics. And so as you can imagine, this can be extremely helpful, right? Because you're customizing and tailoring it, not just to veterans, but veterans in the specific areas where they're texting from. So you're giving them local help that is also specifically designed and thought about and curated because of who they are. So, and there's a lot of funding going towards veterans work these days because veterans have a hard time navigating social services. It's just, there's so much out there, and there's a lot of stuff that isn't good, right? There's a lot of stuff that they have to try to sift through in order to get to the good stuff. Well, if you guys, if you create a program where you're sending them the content, all of the content, you have controls over that, then you're able to give them something that's a single source that's very much tailored to their specific needs. Now, the other piece that they have in Heart of Florida United Way 211 is they have the live help piece. So at any point in time, they remind them that, by the way, you can text for live support. Just text your zip code, or actually they use a keyword that's zip code or a keyword. And then that comes into their live help queue so that they can provide live help, plug into their INR, who's already there handling the INR encounters, but then also be getting these group messages from the program that's the push. So it's combining push style with live help in a very unique and interesting way. Okay, and then there's this automated follow-up and surveys piece. Now, this automated follow-up and surveys Caree talked about, it's very much consistent with best practice. You're all working towards getting better follow-up, right? More information about the outcome of these encounters. Well, taking text and using text in this way can oftentimes get better results. You've tried the call. A lot of agencies are struggling with that, calling back individuals. They just wanted the referral. They didn't want to be bothered with these additional questions, and they definitely didn't want to be called, right? And so using text and to ask these questions is proving to be very effective. And you can also text surveys to callers. So you, just as you can have delayed text message surveys going out to people who you text with, you can also have a survey go out to end users who call you. And it's a simple upload of your mobile phone numbers, and then they get that survey just as the live text encounters do. So it's and the text surveys are completely, this isn't a hybrid. So this isn't texting somebody to a link to go to SurveyMonkey. A lot of times people are dropping off and not doing that. This is actually just having the questions entirely texted to them. And it is showing to be very effective. People are just a little bit more willing to share information about the success of their follow-up. And then also, if you let them know up front that it's just a couple questions, right? So you don't overburden them. All right. And then the research shows text is working, right? All of the research is saying that this is a good method for communicating through INR and providing people with social services, and even complex social services. Caree talked about trying to migrate end users to the phone while they are texting, and she doesn't have much of a success rate, nor do any others. So migrating between the channels isn't necessary, it doesn't work well. So those who call you will call you, those who will text you, and you don't want to mix those up. Okay, sustainability. So new opportunities for research and collaborations. Wonderful stuff here. HHS and CDC have made specific recommendations stating text offers unprecedented opportunities to improve the health of U.S. population and reach traditionally underserved groups. All right, so please write in your questions now, guys. Caree is here with us, and we will take questions. Please, there could be questions about MyShare, or there could be questions about what Heart of Florida is doing, and we are open to doing so now. Are you still here, Caree?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, good. Okay, guys, so you can write in your questions. Okay, Caree, so what size is your, or what is your call volume currently?
So last year we did over 250,000 contacts, and of those, about 20% were electronic. And of that 20%, I think it was 17% were text. So even though we have 24/7 chat and email as well, text is really where we're seeing our client base drawn to that modality. And that includes the 250,000 contacts is only service programs that also have text with them. We do other, like the National Suicide Prevention Line and other programs that aren't related and don't have text attached to them. So those are just INR only contacts that also have the 250,000. They also have those clients also have the option of texting.
Okay. Thank you. And when and how often do you survey and or follow up?
So we try to do that with every client, but we get their consent to do so. So if the client declines, then we do not. But we will, anytime it's appropriate to ask. So all of us know that anytime you're interacting with a client, it can be a crisis contact where the follow-up you're going to want to offer is very different than a quality assurance follow-up. Or it could be that you're texting with someone and they're very short, very curt. They don't want to give you any information, and you simply ask, would you mind doing a survey? You know they're going to say no. They do say no. So we offer it to everyone and anyone. The only time we would never offer it, where we have a policy against it, is if there's an admission by the client that there's domestic violence in their situation, in which case we advise them to delete the text off of their phone. And what we tell them to do is at the end of the conversation to text to stop and then delete the message off of their phone. That way, like as you were talking about earlier, that allows them to opt out because that stops, so they will not get any. There will be no glitch in the system, or we will not text them. Nothing will happen to put them in danger. And then also deleting the text message off their phone allows them to be safe.
Great, thank you. And just to footnote that the text conversations, if you are a crisis center or a domestic violence center or an agency that is concerned about privacy, the system can be there can be further anonymity layers, meaning that phone numbers can be scrambled. Also, past conversations can be removed from the user interface so that you have a more anonymous user interface for that particular work. It just depends, though, on your region and state and what your local laws and regulations are related to that. But anonymity can also be a layer or component of the user interface. So you can make that promise to your end user. And Caree, how long do you train your specialists for the texting piece?
So that actually is a really interesting question. So we do 80 hours of training. That's our base training. And that does include the basic text training. So every staff member can do text. And some of our staff don't like it and don't want to do it. And some of our staff love it. So those staff that love it, and then of course it depends on scheduling as well, because obviously in the overnight you want everybody to be able to respond to text as well as all of your modalities because you have less staff here. So we make sure that the people who via their schedule are forced to do text or who prefer it, so we know we're going to have them singled out and doing text all day long, get extra training on text. So the base training is at least familiarization with the system. They have to be able to log in independently and do 4 successful test or role play texts. And then after that, if we know they're going to be on constantly, consistently, or because of their schedule required to do that, like the overnight, we'll do an additional 4 with them. But sometimes, they're just great at it. And after the first 4, they've got it because it's really not that different. So it really doesn't add to the training program that you're already doing. It's just an additional way of doing role plays. So that's when we incorporate that, is during our role play time during training.
How many, you answered that question, okay. Okay. Okay, and then how are you responding to other areas or regions? How are you able to do that?
Well, the really great thing about EMS is that everything comes through with the zip code right at the top. So I don't know, Jonathan, if you want to go back to that slide where you showed the platform. I don't know if you had a zip code showing. So, right. So when you first get the text, you're going to see the phone number there underneath Jonathan. You'll see the 503 phone number that came in. And then the first text that you'll get over 898, the subject there is not going to say demo. It's going to have the client's zip code. So that's going to let you know immediately when you put that, you can put that zip code into any CRM you're using. We're actually using 4 different, I think it's 4 right now, different CRMs. So no matter what CRM you have open, if you put that zip code in, it'll tell you what city and state that is. So if it's Tennessee, we know, okay, we got to flip over to that particular CRM, or if it's Kentucky or whichever. So that's very helpful for us because the zip code's right there, the phone number, and then the name that the client chose to use.
And how many dedicated staff do you have doing text messaging? I think you maybe touched on that, but if you want to.
Sure. So during business,
you covered the growth period, and you guys have gone through so much growth. It sounds like that the model has evolved there.
Yeah. So in the beginning, when we did the soft launch, we really had a couple people who were logged in, but they were also logged into phones. And we found that was, of course, not, like I said, I would go back in time and tell myself to move forward much more quickly because of the cost savings involved and the efficiency involved. And it also makes the staff member, if they really enjoy texting and interacting with clients over the platform that way, then it makes them happier to be able to not take phone calls, to just be able to do that. So right now during business hours, which we do some Central Standard Time work, actually a lot of Central Standard Time work. So we have staff from Eastern Standard Time, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. We will have 3 staff members logged in, 2 of which exclusively do electronic contacts, and the third person during the peak times, like early mornings, lunch hour, they're doing exclusively electronic contacts as well. We have had situations where we've had a 4th person log in as a backup because it's just an unusually busy electronic contact day. And then after hours, everybody who's here is logged into electronic contacts because we want to make sure that if we get a spike in that particular modality, that we have enough staff available for that.
What is your FTE for staff? Oh, and do you have an FTE for staff doing texting?
FTE per staff.
I guess a full-time, or
yes.
I guess full-time for electronic, right?
Yes. So Monday through Friday, we're devoting 3 FTEs during business hours completely to electronic contacts at this point. But that's cheaper than having 3 FTEs doing phone calls because you can only do 1 phone call at a time, and you're averaging, somewhere around 5 minutes to 7 minutes a contact on your phone, and then sometimes there might be after call work, or after handle time. So you want to make sure that you're thinking about this. When you think about, oh wow, 3 FTEs pulled off the phones to do electronic contacts. Well, no, it's actually cheaper because those 3 FTEs are doing at least 3 texts or other electronic contacts at the same time. And like I said before, some of my high performers can do 4 or 5. So you're actually saving on efficiency there. You're reaching more clients with less staff. And then with the canned responses and things like that, we're able to really get it going very quickly in our response time to them. And then if we get someone who has, 3 electronic contacts open at that one time, which is our best practice, they can also be doing some other things at that same time, administratively, if the clients aren't responding. So there's efficiencies there as well. But that rarely happens. I mean, with text, our clients are, as you said in your very first slide, typically responding very quickly to us. There's just occasionally a client who will, maybe be obviously looking at their phone, doing Facebook, doing something else before they're responding to us. Oh, and the other thing that I forgot to mention that I think is really important as far as efficiency and using text is that we can text referrals straight out of our CRM. And that's really important for all of those people who call you while they're driving. So I don't know if other 211s or INRs have that challenge, but we get a lot of people who will say, oh, I'm driving, I can't take that down. Can you email that to me? And having that option of being able to say to them, you don't have to pull over, or don't worry, we'll text it to you. That's amazing. So even when we're on the phone, text is creating efficiencies for us. It's also faster to text someone the resource than it is to have them write it down. So we've gotten into the habit now, here my staff just will ask, would you like me to text that to you, rather than, having to repeat the phone number several times. That also reduces staff error and client error and inverting phone numbers and things like that. So it's been really great for that as well.
Yeah, and additionally, if you have, like CRMs are connecting up and using the API documents that we put forward, and if you have VisionLink, for instance, they are dedicating, and since the year's conference, they have dedicated development to integrating VisionLink. RTM is already integrated completely. So integration with your CRM is coming, or most of the CRMs have committed to integrating. So it makes it just simpler, right? If you've got a client that you're having a conversation with, and during that conversation, you can be selecting referrals or resources that you're going to send to them, just being able to select that, click a button, and have that go into your conversation and dovetail, bookend it, close out that contact, and not have to click back over to the user interface to complete that conversation. It's just a nice, like elegant way to combine your functionality where you are, right, where your specialist is in those two worlds. So we're integrating where it is going to provide the most impact, and that's mobilizing those referrals out of your CRM, getting them texted as quickly and efficiently as possible. Besides role playing, and we have one more question. I know we've gone a tiny bit over the hour, but one more question. Besides role playing, what do you do with within the 80 hours of the training? So can you explain a little bit more of how they're training?
Sure, yeah. So our 80 hours is, we have 25 hours of classroom, half of which is role plays and half of which is didactic, where we're actually walking them through and showing that. Then we also have time in our computer training room where we're having everyone log into all the CRMs, logging into EMS, and actively using all of the software before we set them loose on the world, so that they get that hands-on practice experience in a group format. And then we also do a tiered shadowing process, and that tiered shadowing process is where they'll sit and listen, or in the case of texting, watch. So there's a combination of things that go on there. And then the next step is, with texting, they would be interacting directly with the client while the experienced staff member is giving them tips. With phone, we have the inexperienced, the trainee typing and using the CRM while the experienced staff member talks with the client. So with text, you can kind of skip that intermediate step and go right to full on, because you have that moment where the experienced staff member can coach you through that whole process of all the things you're trying to do, interact with the client, use your CRM, all of that. And then the last part of shadowing on the phones is the trainee takes the full contact as the CRM and everything with the experienced staff member, plugged into them. But that with text, that's happening right away. So in our shadowing process, we mix that up, and it depends. If we have a trainee who we know, now we don't hire anyone who can't type at least 35 words per minute, but if we have a trainee who we know is going to be working part-time Monday through Friday, they've expressed that they do not want to do text and chat, then we will focus their training primarily on phones, but we make sure they're competent, or they have a certain level of competency with electronic contacts. And then the final stage of the training, of course, is they have to pass several tests. So the shadowing is also a test because they're being evaluated by the trainee, the specialist that's with them. The trainee is being evaluated, but they have to pass a CRM test. They have to go into the resource databases and locate resources for all of the different CRMs that we use to make sure they're competent in that. They pass a post-crisis test, and then we give them the test out of the ABCs of INR manual, which is the questions at the end of each chapter. We make sure that they can give us that back as well. So there's a lot of independent study. The topics that we cover are primarily the INR ARC, the RIDE model, cultural competency, special populations like veterans and elders, mandated reporting, crisis de-escalation, and suicide prevention. So it's a lot, and 80 hours does sound like a lot, but we really want to make sure that we have someone who's going to be able to provide top-notch service, even if they're only here, 4-hour shifts 3 times a week.
Perfect. Thank you. We did run a little bit over, and I know some of you had to drop away. Those who stuck in, thank you so much for being a part of this session today. And you guys are the place that are doing all of this really good early adoption work. Those who adopt texting, we talked a little bit about that. The desire or the public demand for it, right? But the infrastructure is still kind of assembling. And you would think that for-profit would be helping people by text sooner than the nonprofit, but actually the nonprofit sector is ahead of the game a little bit here. And so anybody who's adopting text is really part of defining what the model is. And Caree talked a lot about what their model is. Anytime you have any information you want to share about your model, please feel free to reach out to us, info@preventionpacettext.com, and share with us how you are using texting, because we're very interested in what your model is as well. Thank you so much, Caree, for your help today. Again, Caree Jewell, Senior Director 211, and I am going to end the session, okay?
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, Caree, thanks. Have a good rest of your day.
You too.